I'm Malcolm, and I'm 5 years old. I have cancer.
I'm Todd Thornock. I'm Malcolm's dad.
I'm Samara Thornock. I'm Malcolm's mom.
So it was last May, and we were in the emergency room here in Ames, and it was just Malcolm and I because Samara was out of town. And they had done a scan of his head because he had complained about his head hurting and his tummy hurting, so they did an abdomen scan as well. And the doctor could tell that something was wrong, and he said, I can't remember if he said then that he had cancer, but it was pretty clear that he thought that Malcolm had cancer, and that's why we were referred to the University of Iowa hospitals. It's hard because when you hear something like cancer, you think of death, because cancer is, you're trying to beat it, otherwise the child or the person dies. And so that was all that came into my mind. Was I have a 4-year-old sitting on my lap who is not going to be around much. That was a lot of that was in ignorance, not knowing what was ahead, but that's the first thing that came to mind. It was really overwhelming to think of losing a child, and while that feeling is still not it's still overwhelming in many ways. It's we've had more time to understand more about cancer and about life and other things too. That it's not overwhelming, but at that time when I found out, it was very overwhelming, and I had my wife out of town, and it was just me with my son while friends were watching other kids. It was an overwhelming time.
He had been sick for several days. When you look back and somebody asks what were his symptoms, he was in a position where his type of cancer hit for a very long time. So his symptoms, looking back on it, you go, oh, well, yeah, of course, but his is kind of the least likely scenario. You look at all the most likely things to be going on, and all of the symptoms could be attributed to those things. You know, anemia, he hadn't been eating well, his eyes were bruised. Well, he had fallen and hit himself between his forehead, so he's going to have bruised eyes for a while. But he got sick with a fever, and the fever didn't go away. And within about 4 or 5 days, he then started complaining about his head hurting and his tummy hurting.
He was complaining about his tummy hurting, but you know, with kind of flu-like symptoms, that goes with the territory. But he never complains about his head hurting. That's why
that was the tip-off. And being out of town was really, really difficult, because when Todd called me, he said, I could tell something was very wrong, because he's not usually one to be very emotional in that way. And he said, well, the doctors found a mass in his abdomen and his head, and have told us that Malcolm's really sick, and I'm headed to the University of Iowa to treatment. And trying to drive home and trying to get on an airplane, on a standby flight. I mean, many miracles happened that I actually was able to make it home, but we were very, very worried that we were going to lose him very quickly because of how far along the cancer was.
The first time when I had hair, the chemo made it away. I don't like about the chemo. Well, I didn't want my cancer to go away, because I didn't want to be just me.
We went to the University of Iowa May of 2013, and when Malcolm was diagnosed, he was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma, which means that the cancer had infiltrated both sides of his body as well as into his bone marrow. So they put us on a protocol of high-dose chemo, surgery, and the potential of stem cell transplant. And we followed the protocol right up until stem cell transplant. And prior to stem cell transplant, the doctors told us that his cancer had become very refractory or unresponsive to chemo treatments, and that because he still had cancer in his bones, that going into stem cell transplant would not be an ideal thing for him, because the likelihood that he would still have it, or that it wouldn't be as successful as it should, would be high. So at that point, the doctors evaluated with other professionals in the field and said, okay, and they said that it was time to go into clinical trials. So since clinical trials have happened, we've tried another couple protocols which have involved radiation, high-dose radiation treatments, and a couple more rounds of chemo to see if those would work. And as of this last Wednesday, we were told that the treatments, that the cancer is still remaining refractory, and that we're at a position right now where we are evaluating the toxicity of the treatments, because there's not really much hope for them to be as effective as we'd like. So
at this point, the tried and true ways of dealing with cancer, they're kind of all used up. He used chemo until his body can't take it anymore, and now he did MIBG therapy, which is some kind of nuclear therapy. That he had a couple rounds of that, and that was very effective, but it's not completely effective.
You can only do so much before your body can't take it anymore. And he's already had stem cell rescues and some other things. So he's at the point where we have to kind of evaluate quality of life when we evaluate treatments, and potentials of effectiveness of those treatments. Where thankfully there's still a couple things that the doctors are willing to try, but it's with the understanding that given the amount of cancer he still has, the potential of them working to their full effectiveness for remission is very diminished. So that's where we're at right now. It sounds so cliche, but honestly, it's like, how has it not changed our life? It sounds really cliche.
It's true. I mean, it was within a month. I was attending my son's baseball game, and we had been coaches before Malcolm's diagnosis. And I'm standing in the outfield watching as some of the other parents are coaching this team and thinking, just 2 weeks ago, his life was done. It was just in 2 weeks, your perspective changes on relationships within the family, relationship with friends. All priorities seem to, anything that does not have the utmost priority, whether it's family or our beliefs in God or our friendships, everything just left. Any material worries were gone, and then there are even relationships within the family that changed for better mostly, but it's also a struggle that a lot of people can't handle, and you see straining families as well. And we've been blessed enough to.
Yeah, we're very much planners. And that was a very hard adjustment to go, well, this is what your life will look like for the next 3 weeks.
And that's as far as you can plan
ahead. What do you mean? That's 3 weeks. And even within that 3-week period, this is only what your life is going to look like within the next 7 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you have 5 other kids where you're trying to plan activities and baseball and school and who's going to take care of them and who's going to go to the hospital and who's going to, and if there's a fever at that moment, you have to leave and be hospitalized, or that was a really hard adjustment.
Yeah. Basically, you learn that you're not in control. You have so little control. I mean, you're your child's advocate the whole time, and so in that you have to be very up on what's going on with him, and you have some control there. But the timing, it's just not. It's in the control of really God and maybe the doctors, maybe, but not even that, because usually they're constrained.
Before we just thought it was a disease. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Like
we don't
fever.
really care.
It is a
yeah, like a
disease.
fever that's kind of bad, but it'll be over soon. But we've learned more about cancer, and we've learned how other people feel about it. It's sometimes sad when they die, and sometimes it's happy, and we learn lessons like we learn about medical stuff and lessons like it's kind of hard to explain, but you do learn some stuff and there's blessings and trials from it too.
And when a few days ago, we heard that Malcolm's friend that had cancer, they couldn't do anything about the cancer, and that his friend was going to die.
Her name's Emma, so We were really sad the other day.
Oh,
Malcolm was
Emma.
crying like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
He was really sad.
Yeah.
Because it was his friend.
But then, just a few days after that, we heard that Malcolm had a chance that he will, like a more likely chance that he will survive cancer.
We were Spencer's baseball coaches during the diagnosis. After that time, hospitalization occurred 6 out of 8 chemo treatments. Yeah.
7 out of 10
Right.
ultimately.
7 out of 10 ultimately. So you're talking about being away from the other children, having one parent gone probably 60% of the time, 50, 60%
I'd
of
say
the
over the
time.
last 14 months, half the time.
Yeah,
We've
50%
had
of the
some
time.
quiet time.
Yeah. Excuse me. So you have one parent gone. You have a brother who's undergoing cancer treatments.
And for these kids, they hear cancer and it's associated with death, and they don't know how.
It's
How
very
many children have to cope with death
very stressful.
with the thought of it?
And so the fact that they could do any activities over summer was nullified
Yeah,
because
last
we had
summer
no
was nothing.
consistency.
Taking my tubies out, then I will go here back. My favorite part was looking at the new box. Why? My kids have cancer. One had cancer, and yeah, he had tubies like me in my cabin. I didn't want to eat my cancer friends. Best dancing award.
First year of treatment. I mean, when you're 4 or 5 years old and you have to go through all these procedures, and yeah, the doctors and nurses try to make them really as comfortable as possible. Some things are just really hard for the kids. As they'd be really hard for adults, probably overwhelming. And Malcolm's been an exceptionally patient. I mean, he's done such a good job. But those beads that he gets to have, and we've been to a number of hospitals, they don't all do them. And those beads mean so much. It's such a little thing in the mind of an adult. But for these kids, I mean, am I willing to endure, is this 5-year-old willing to endure another poke for a bead? And yeah, they do it.
Do I get a bead for
Do I
this?
get a bead for this?
Do I get a bead for this?
And you know, that helps
Yes.
them get
I
over
get a bead for this.
that fear. It just, they really are beads for bravery. I mean, he loves showing them off, and he loves talking about them. He's owed a whole bunch. We got to talk to
He
him.
loves going to get them.
Yeah.
And the nurses who help him get them love that connection. Except that they could go to cancer camp because mom and dad didn't have to be there. The sibling camp. They could go to the sibling camp. Mom and dad didn't have to be there. They could go and they could be with other kids that were going through the same things and experiencing the same things. And they came back expressing a lot more peace and understanding of normalcy. They could gain some normalcy by seeing that there are other children who had felt that way. They gain, I think, an increased awareness of their situation and how positive it was, because other situations where children had passed away, they had opportunities to express their feelings in a safe environment where other people understood, and since then have also expressed how important that was for them when they go to school. And they said the kids at school don't understand. We can remind them and say, well, the kids at camp understand, and you can make friends there and have good experiences there. Not to mention all the activities that they were involved in, which were very much excited about, and coming home bouncing off the walls about how much fun they had had. And the idea that that is something that is free is a big deal, because a lot of these families who are you already have huge financial obligations potentially because of the treatments, and to have that available for free is a really, really big deal. It's a really big blessing.
And then for Malcolm, I mean, being able to go to cancer camp this year, we tried to make sure everything all the stars aligned and told him, I mean, for his treatments, they are revolving around his opportunity to go to this. We're not going to do chemo too close to this time in case he can't go, because this is too important for him to go. And he had such a great time being on his own as the first time. And when you think you have a child with cancer, why would you want to let him go for a week to be all by himself with people that we don't necessarily know? But it meant so much for him to be able to go and make friends and just have a week to feel special, that, you know.
I